Well, this is going to be something new. Obviously, I am alone, no co-host. But it's called Unwarranted Insights for a reason. And like why it's called that specifically is kind of when something is warranted, at least how I use the word, means it's like something that other people should see, and unwarranted is things that people really don't need to see. And that's what all the videos on this channel are gonna be. So why am I out here in a suit or to make something that people shouldn't really see? I like to view this, at least why I'm doing this solo, as a kind of verbal exercise. I know and possibly you can tell that I'm very scattered brained when I speak. And I think by kind of forcing myself to just talk for, 40 to an hour will actually improve my, what do you call it, like auditory skills, if that's a word. I like to, my head, it has a bunch of thoughts going on a lot of the time, and I use words like and like a lot when I speak, and I wish to not use those words anymore. I mean, a bit of background, I'm a philosophy undergraduate right now, and I want to pursue getting a PhD in philosophy and becoming a professor. And what is a professor but an orator, especially of philosophy, right? So I kind of see a need for me to improve how I speak. And something that's funny is I had a bunch of notes of what I would talk about, yet they are on the very camera that is filming me. So, let's see, yeah. Throughout high school, in my English classes particularly, I would do like well on the assignments, but a continuous type of critique was that my sentence structure and overall organization of the paper was usually very scattered, and things that seemed obviously connected to me and made sense when reading over them it wasn't as cohesive as it should have been, according to those teachers, of course. And I respect their opinion, honestly. At that time, we were much more educated than I am currently. And I realized I kind of write as how I talk. I write how I talk, yeah. I'm a Christian, and you should be too. But one day when I was preaching to this club that we have on campus, and it was kind of a devotional, a brother came up to me and asked me for my notes of what I was preaching. And I gave them to him, of course, and when he read them, he was like, wow, this is exactly how you said it. I'm like, well, he didn't exactly, he said, this sounds exactly like you. And I told him, of course, it's because that's exactly what I read. I have a very hard time going off the cuff when it comes to things like that. And that's an issue, I think. I think it's an issue. Because with not being able to, just go off the cuff when preaching to people or talking to people, it comes with a bit of anxiety. And I could say I definitely have that when it comes to speaking in front of others. And I think I'm also a pretty poor conversationalist. I have a hard time, unless it's something I know a lot about. I have a hard time keeping conversations with people, just like small talk, and even beyond that. Conversations where they would be interesting, or people will be able to like dive deeper than to most people. I am particularly poor at that. So I kind of get, I don't want to use the word shell-shocked, but just like shocked and, frozen. And, that leads to a sort of bit of social awkwardness, though I think I've improved on that, and, I'm striving to improve on that, and even this is me striving to improve on that. So I'm not terrible. I just have an expectation that I want to get to. But I think this kind of originated in my interest in being a philosopher. I feel like philosophers, as a category of people, sort of have a style of thinking and a style of speaking. Certainly with the people I've met, and even some of the professors I've had. I can recall in an ethics course I took at the university I go to, the professor, though it was just a PhD candidate student, still, he's practically there. But in his ethics course, as the students were, engaging with the material he was presenting, he would always get sidetracked into things like metaphysics or epistemology, and then eventually, I can't go here anymore. And of course, getting off the track of conversation's a normal thing to do, but what I saw is that a student was really just asking an ethical question, And in order to answer the ethical question, he went into other like parts of philosophy, just so he could present his cohesive whole idea of why this idea makes sense for the philosopher who wrote it. And certainly it was a fantastic way to explain the ethics of a particular, like normative view. But I really saw myself in that. It was something I could relate to because it was something I do very often in my speech, where in order to answer a question, inherently I just see in that question like 50 more questions, which then I answer before getting to the actual question that was offered. And this seems to be, if you're someone I know and whom I've had a conversation with, then it's almost like to a joking point where I do this habit of not answering the question directly, even though it seems to me that I am obviously answering the question. So I feel like it's just something about philosophy, asking why, and always wanting to get down to not like second order things before getting to the first order, even though like everyone knows the second order stuff inherently. You don't really have to define words in such a way. We all have an intuitive conception. And going on to that, kind of wrapping up that point, I hope through this being the recording here, that I can be more precise in my language. Because I think that's something, particularly because I want to become a professor one day, that philosophers should be good at, being precise in language. Especially in, the analytic tradition here in America. So hopefully this will, this will be good. So I wanted to backtrack a little bit to what I was saying earlier about second order things and how you don't need to define words or go meta at all. No, not at all, but in most cases, because there's an intuitive understanding. And the deeper I've gone into, my undergraduate career, it's a view that I've kept coming back to, that being that most philosophical things are just intuition, and that you're going to be predisposed to a certain philosophy just because it best fits your intuitions. In all like classes and courses I've taken so far, there's always been like this kind of objection at the back of all the philosophical classes I've taken. And that objection is, at a certain point, you just have to accept something. There's always just going to be these sets of a priori premises that you just need to accept in order to have a framework. And that's because these a priori premises. They're not really provable. And maybe it's the standard of proof that's funky. Is that a fly on the camera? Well, maybe it's the standard of proof that's funky, and that's why you can't prove anything. But it doesn't seem like that to me. I've read, well, I haven't read, because they're expensive. I've read articles, like encyclopedias, surrounding Alvin Plantinga's epistemology, and it's one that really appeals to me. It's why I use words like warrant and unwarranted and things like that so much in my vocabulary. He wrote a book called Warranted Christian Belief, which I haven't read. But a part of his philosophy has to do with properly basic beliefs being kind of the foundation on which you build up a whole bunch of other beliefs. And it's been the epistemology that is the most appealing to me. I can't say, actually, Plantinga's definition of properly basic, as I haven't read the book, and also it seems to be slipping my mind. But I know he gives multiple definitions, then settles on a final one. And the conclusion of like a good definition of properly basic beliefs. Ooh. Maybe it's something like this. Oh no, I'm confusing two things. I can't remember. It doesn't matter that much anyways. But just to go back to it, warrant for Plantinga, as I remember it, and this may be incorrect, apologies if it is, but it goes something like this. A belief is warranted. It has to do with something with proper functioning mental faculties, rational faculties. Oof. I can't remember it at all, but if I had my notes, though, I can't remember it at all, but Plantinga is a man who sort of rejects or calls the course of natural theology as a failure, something that is not really valuable and doesn't do much for proving or giving evidence or credibility to theism. And what Plantinga does instead is say, we don't actually need to give justification for belief in God. Because belief in God is a properly basic belief. There's a great video that Notre Dame has posted, University of Notre Dame, or Notre Dame, I don't know how to say it, but that explains exactly this view. I remember seeing it very, very long ago. I was probably a freshman in high school, but once you have belief in God as warranted and properly basic, you don't really need to give arguments for it. Same as you don't need to give arguments for your belief that other minds exist. That though you watching me, you can have a belief that I have a mind. And I'm not just a robot or, just have brute experience with no self-aware consciousness. And when you put God in saying it's just warranted, I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. Why would someone need a argument or evidence for their belief in God when someone like me, I can just say that I have just a sense of the divine, I don't need to prove that these glasses in my hand exist, right? All I need to do is just say I have a sense that the glasses right here are right here. And maybe that's proof. Maybe that's a proof. If you're G.E. Moore, that is a proof. But but I can say the same thing about God. I can just say I feel a divine sense, and I cannot not believe there is a God. And that seems perfectly rational for me, I see no problem with that. It just makes sense. I cannot conceive of a world where God does not exist. Neither can I conceive of a world where, let's say, where everyone else doesn't have a mind but I do, or that I am dreaming right now. Maybe I could conceive of that, but that seems just absurd. The external world is definitely here, and I don't really need to give an argument for it. And if I do, the argument is probably just going to have holes. And if I based my belief that the external world exists on the basis of arguments, some clever philosopher will come along and probably tear apart that argument, and therefore tear apart my belief in the external world. And that just seems silly to do. So if the belief in God is properly basic, is warranted on the grounds of proper basicality, then I don't need to give an argument for it. And an interesting thing here that I actually haven't thought much of is that if you were to come to me 2 years ago, probably 2 years ago, and tell me why I believed in the existence of God, I would have given you arguments. And here's another interesting thing that I think presses more on the issue that I'm trying to get at here is I wouldn't have given you the argument, the sort of look at the trees argument, right? That reality itself speaks to the existence of God. And I don't mean to use the cosmological argument or anything like that. What I'm trying to get at is that I didn't have a sense of the divine. I didn't look out into creation and say, this obviously means there's a God. It wasn't intuitive to me then, but now it's an intuition that I cannot get rid of. I can't go back to the view I once held, or not even the view I once held, but the perspective I once held, where I would look to to these mountains and not really see anything besides the mountains. Because now when I look towards them, I sense the divine, and I know there is a God. I remember there's this one famous Carl Jung clip in which he is in an interview, and the interviewer asks him, "Do you believe in God?" And he responds not by saying the affirmative yes, or by giving arguments, or by pointing to any which thing. But he says, "No, I do not believe in God. I know God." Something along those parts. And that's really, that's where I have come to settle. It's an interesting view, and I know Kierkegaard has written something similar to this, I believe. And I have to do a lot of reading for school right now, many books. But I hope sometime in the future, hopefully the near future, I will get time to read and think about what he says. Something I really want to do. But anyways, on to the next little discourse I wanted to talk about here is I've written a paper. It's on my Substack if anyone is interested in reading it. And the paper itself was of course for a course in epistemology, and it was a response to Bernard Williams' critique of Descartes, specifically on the point of the cogito. And I had to critique Williams, of course, just for the paper to be valid. That was kind of the criteria, is to critique someone else's view. But that was like not the point of the paper. Within the critique, I, inserted my own argument, which was basically my view on the Cartesian cogito. And specifically on the resulting, I think therefore I am, from dream skepticism. That I could be in a dream right now. That I could wake up in this entire experience, the world around me, all these things that right now I'm fully convinced are real, are part of the external world, but upon waking, realize that I was fooled by my own subconscious. They're just sort of reflecting, and actually it was a dream that I had that gave me this argument that I'm about to present. That it seems to be in a dream, it is not only the perceptions of things that are faulty and, of course, not real, but it also seems to me that it is the choices that you make in the dream that are also spurious. This realization for an argument, which I wish I had, it's on my phone though, came to me from a was quite literally revealed to me in a dream. I had a dream in which I did something that upon waking I realized I would never do. And I'm kind of sure all of us have had this type of experience where we do things in dreams which, are criminal or are absurd. Things like, betraying a friend, harming loved ones, genuinely trying to bend your arm backwards in a dream, something absurd like that, or even trying to fly, right? Something that we would obviously never do. I would never choose to try to fly. I know I don't have wings and I cannot fly, obviously. Neither would I actually harm someone whom I love, which is what I did in a dream. And upon waking up from that dream, I had the feeling that I think many people have had before, where you wake up and you're shocked. You're shocked at what you did in your own dream. You're like, wow, why did I dream that? But, you realize eventually that, no, you would have never chosen that. And obviously you're not actually responsible for the choice, because it's a dream, right? That's what gets interesting to me. That we are not responsible for the choices we make in dreams. I think of an example of a spouse having a dream of cheating on their spouse, right? And let's say upon waking up and informing their spouse about the dream they had of infidelity, the spouse being told the dream shouldn't conclude that their partner is genuinely seeking infidelity, right? Because it was a dream. And that's very telling, I think, and to me a very compelling argument that the choices we make in dreams are not genuine choices. At least for the dreams where we obviously don't know that we're dreaming. And to me it's very interesting, because if I very well could be in a dream right now, and that this object I hold in my hands is fake, is not real, does not exist in the external world, then the very choice I made to pick up the glasses also could have been fake. So, dream skepticism does not just put doubt on the existence of the external world, if it works, of course, but also it would put doubt on our very will. What would be the result of dream skepticism is a view of the self that is simply an observer of experience. All I could say that I am is the subject of experience. I cannot say I am a thinking thing, as Descartes says. I cannot say that I am a thing with agency. All I could say, if dream skepticism is valid, is that I am a thing which observes. And I obviously don't think dream skepticism works. I just go off intuition, really. But it's really interesting, that argument to me. I don't know what exactly the effects of the argument would be, except that you have to now prove the existence of your will if you want to prove the existence of your will. To me, it is self-evident that I am the one who wills. But, yeah. I guess that's another section of it. You know, I've had this, maybe this will be the closing thing I end with. I've had this pseudo-psychological theory where the manner that people carry out conversation, or the way people talk, tells you a lot about that person. And I am no psychologist, but the reason I think there is for believing this is that the way a person talks, I think, is very close to a way a person thinks. And if you want to see, and I think we all know this intuitively, that if you want to get to know someone, you have to talk to them. And the more you talk to someone, the more you will know them. Which is very interesting, because you don't have to exactly talk about them when you're talking to them. You can talk about any course of subject, anything in the world. And just by them talking, you can get to know them more deeply, right? I think I am someone who, in conversation, wants to learn. And that is my chief trait. And what I mean by that, to elaborate, is that in conversation, my goal is not to increase rapport with someone, to share something I've learned, to it's not those two, all right? I'll say what it is now. But it is just to learn something from the other person, or from the conversation itself. I am poor, from what I've been told, and also some self-reflection, at explaining things in a very clear way, or explaining things at all. Upon asking to explain something, or to or if someone asks something of me, insofar as they mean they want to learn something from me, I do not like it. I do not take pleasure in explaining anything with other people. And it comes through how I speak, I believe. And I think is why, as I began this recording, of why I am so scatterbrained when I do have to be the active participant in a conversation. So I know that all I care about, really, my ideal when it comes to talking, is to learn something from the conversation. That it does tell people something about my character. But I'm not exactly sure what it says about me. I love to be the student of other people. And I dislike being the teacher. Of course, I want to become a professor. So that's interesting there. There's something there. But in so as far as I talk, I don't like teaching. So I suppose I'll leave that. I'll leave that to you to figure out if that means anything. And I'll think about it myself, of course. But it's interesting. Those are some of the thoughts I've had. I don't have much more to say, but I'll say this. The reason why I believe I am so attracted to philosophy is one, there's so much to be learned, and two, because it creates dialogue in which fundamentally, where I don't have to teach. I can present an argument to someone without needing to teach them the argument. Because all I could be interested in is a response. And why I'm interested so much in philosophy, I think could possibly just be summed up by my psychology. I really like things like chemistry. I enjoy it as a hobby and just learning about it in general. But never as much as I've loved philosophy. I think I'll leave it there. Awesome.